We should talk about, there were actually a couple of other incidents this week.
Whoa.
Yeah, so there's been another close encounter in the air where a Philippine Coast Guard aircraft, basically a Cessna, was harassed by another Chinese fighter jet. Now, it wasn't at the scale of the P3 incident, back in 2001, and it wasn't even like last year where they released some flares. But it was an incident, and it was, so the Philippine Coast Guard did send out an aircraft to figure out what was going on out there, and there was harassment by a Chinese fighter jet. And then we all woke up this morning to find out that one of the things that the Chinese state media was good for was alerting us to the fact that there apparently had been a U.S. freedom of navigation operation going by Scarborough Shoal, which brings up lots of questions that I have, which I don't think have been answered. And maybe we won't get answers to those either. But one of the first ones is, did we plan this a long time ahead of time, like we usually do with FONOPs, as we call them? Or was this something that we decided after this incident, which would be, which would raise my eyebrows? So
that'd be pretty quick.
It would be. I mean, and you'd have to sort of get lucky to some degree, because you have to say, okay, these vessels are in the area, so let's go ahead and we'll just reroute them, for a FONOP. So I can imagine it happening, but if it was pre-planned, then the timing is exquisite.
Maybe that's why the Philippine vessel went into Scarborough Shoal when it did.
What's that? Say that again?
Maybe that's why the Philippine vessel got so close to Scarborough Shoal.
Because it knew there was a FONOP? So it would actually, there's obviously a lot of operational sharing between the U.S. and the Philippines, so it could have happened. One of the weird things about FONOPs, we should talk about what they are, because not everybody understands them. So Freedom of Navigation Operations is a program that the U.S. Navy has had for over 4 decades, and by which they essentially back up the U.S. fidelity toward the treaty it never signed, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. We agreed to it, but we've never got it all the way through the Senate and had it ratified. So it's one of those really strange situations where China, which signed the treaty, does not abide by the treaty, especially in the South China Sea, and the U.S., which did not ratify the treaty, and we're always reminded about that, actually not only do we abide by it, we assertively, we basically say, we're going to go by this place because it is our right under international law to do so. And if we don't do it, then nobody will do it. And that will mean that your excessive claim, the thing that says that you should control more water than you actually should, then that becomes de facto law.
And just to remind everyone, we exercise these FONOPs all over the world, including on allies.
Yes. I believe you and I were in Australia at the time when there was a rumor that we were going to do a FONOP around Australia, and it caused a great deal of consternation amongst our allies. Ultimately, the answer to the question was, yeah, but that kind of is the program, and by doing it here, it gives us the credibility to do it everywhere else, because we can say this is just a worldwide program. And so it's not targeting China per se. It's just that China has so many claims, so many excessive claims, that you almost can't help but do more against China than you do against others. But this particular one would be what we call an innocent passage FONOP. They haven't said that, at least that I've seen, but that would be logical, because being a ROC under international law, we would normally take those 2 ships and we would just sail in a straight line, not doing any maneuvers. We would say, under innocent passage, even though we recognize that somebody has the right to a 12 nautical mile territorial sea around Scarborough Shoal, we're not saying who it is, even if somebody has it, if we're going through the territorial sea because it's the straightest line to where we're going, which is what innocent passage is, we're going to go in a straight line and not do any maneuvers.
Do you know how close we got to the shoal?
No.
We did the FONOP?
No. And oftentimes these are not sort of, that kind of information is not put out. So, but if it was innocent passage, then it's almost certainly within 12 nautical miles, because that would be what a FONOP essentially would be in that case, right? Because China wouldn't have any claim outside. So the other thing that will happen is if you have a claim that goes beyond 12 nautical miles and you say, well, you can't come out here either, then we'll do that, but we won't do it in an innocent passageway. We'll actually do maneuvers just to sort of demonstrate the fact that we're allowed to do maneuvers outside 12 nautical miles. But that's probably not what happened here.